And in this video clip, I'm going to talk about a posture that I once really did not like, and I couldn't figure out why teachers taught it all the time. Downward facing dog. Pretty much any physical yoga practice that you take will incorporate downward facing dog. Now, that's not the case for like a yin practice or restorative practice, but there's a really good chance that any movement style yoga practice you're doing, there's going to be a downward facing dog. Now, again, I used to not like downward facing dog, but it took me a while to figure out the mechanics and how the whole body worked together as a unit in downward facing dog. So what I'm about to talk about, a few areas of the body where there might be some limitations, there might be some restrictions, and how you can troubleshoot those areas. First, hands and wrists. Most of us are used to being upright. We put a lot of weight in the feet, the ankles, and our body's built to deal with that weight. Hands and wrists can be a little more sensitive. So first thing is establishing a foundation that works for you. I like to take the hands about shoulder distance apart, and I also like to turn the hands a little bit outward. That feels right for my body, it feels right in my wrists, it feels right in my hands. However, you can play with it. You have permission to play with it. Your index fingers might point straight forward, your middle fingers might point straight forward, or they might have a little rotation outward. I wouldn't encourage rotation inward, but you can play a little bit with a tiny rotation outward. So this is how I set up my hands for down dog. I take the hands shoulder distance apart. You can also go a bit wider. I angle the index fingers a tiny bit outward, and then from there, I push through the hands. Right? That feels really strong, really sustainable for me. If you have any kind of pinchy sensations in the wrists, I would say specifically on the top side of the wrist, one thing that I encourage students to play with is elevating the heel of the hand. Now, it can be a little clumsy, especially if you're taking like a flow or vinyasa style class, but sometimes just rolling up a little bit of the edge of your yoga mat, or even putting a towel or a blanket underneath the heels of your hands. So the heels of the hands are just a tiny bit higher than your fingertips. I'm going to do the same setup, hands about shoulder distance apart. I'm going to turn the hands a little bit outward, and then I'm going to push down and forward. Again, it can be a little clumsy if you're doing more of a flow vinyasa style class to kind of deal with that, but it's really helpful. It can sometimes offload the pressure of the wrist. One more thing that I set up for students that are having any hand or wrist issues is placing the hands on blocks. Sometimes that little lift can take some pressure out of the hands. So the blocks are going to be at the same height. Heels of the hands are going to go right to the edge of the block. You could have index fingers straight forward. You could have a little rotation outward. I like rotating a little bit outward specifically here so I can kind of wrap my fingertips around the edges of the block and get a better grip. And then, same thing. I'm just going to now push through the blocks, push down a little bit forward. Okay. So that's a few ways to deal with any wrist, hand issues or limitations. Next area of the body, shoulders. So many people tell me they don't like downward facing dog because it feels really bad in their shoulders. It's often just from misunderstanding of the shoulder joints. So downward facing dog, the arms are in an overhead position. Ultimately, you're upside down and your arms are doing this. When your arms lift overhead, there's a little movement that happens in the shoulder blades. The outer rim of the shoulder blades lift a little bit up, and they also wrap a little bit forward. So that's the same feeling, the same sensation that you're trying to create in downward facing dog. So when you set up down dog, rather than letting the upper arm bones and shoulders kind of collapse into each other, I'm going to show what that looks like in a moment, you're actually thinking of kind of doing the opposite. You're trying to lengthen the upper arm bone and the shoulders away from each other. They're not going to pull away from each other actually, you're trying to find that sensation. So I'm going to set up my hands, I'm going to lift my tail. As I mentioned, in some bodies, the upper arm bone and the shoulders kind of do this. They just collapse. That does not feel very good in my body, and it doesn't feel like I can hold that for very long because I'm starting to get into kind of a painful place. So rather than just dropping down into the joints, you're going to use your hands to push the floor away. And then in opposition, you'll lift your tail really, really high. And that oppositional energy of palms down and sitting bones up will give you the space to lengthen through your armpit. It lets the shoulder blade lift. And then the big thing here, so my shoulder blades are lifting a little bit toward my ears. That's good. And then you want to feel a slight rotation inward of the shoulder blades. So you might be able to see that my shoulder blades are now wrapping a little forward on the front of my rib cage, and then the upper back can widen. One more thing I want to acknowledge about the shoulders in down dog, you're not pressing your chest as far back as you can. I'm not trying to get my head on the mat. Instead, I'm finding that place where I can push and lift the sitting bones, and then wrap the rim of the shoulder blades a little bit forward onto the ribs. Right? And this feels really strong. It feels really sustainable. So if you weren't in downward facing dog, it would be a push overhead and a wrap forward. That's what you're trying to feel. One more thing in downward facing dog, if you have tight hamstrings, if you have a tight lower back, it can be really tricky to get the legs to lengthen. I totally acknowledge that. A few things I would like for you to play with if that's your experience in downward facing dog. Focus on the lift of your sitting bones. Focus on the tilt of your pelvis a little bit forward. And then moving the thigh bones back, moving the creases of the ankles back. So working all these different parts of the legs. So, from downward facing dog, especially if you feel like things are kind of rounded through the back, you're having a hard time lengthening your legs, start with your pelvis. Rock the front rim of your pelvis over the thighs. Lift your sitting bones up really, really high. Then, press your thigh bones toward the wall behind you. And then any amount, press your heels down. And rather than just heels down, also think a little bit of heels back. So heels reach down, heels reach back to help you lengthen out the legs. Again, that's sitting bones up, thigh bones press back, heels melt down. And in downward facing dog, yes, you're working. It's not a chill resting posture, at least in my opinion. You're working. You're using your arms to push. You're rotating the shoulder blades forward. You're lifting the sitting bones. You're melting the heels down. These things are working together in unison to create a really supported shape. Not an easy shape, but a supported shape. I hope that was helpful for you. If you do have limitations in your downward facing dog, or you've got any weird areas that just don't feel right, please feel free to leave a comment for me or even send me an email if that's something that is accessible to you. I hope this was helpful. Thanks for checking it out.